their own capabilities for mutual self-defense is not only is not something that we find offensive, it's something we'd be supportive of, obviously within the confines of their constitutional system. But they have some limitations in what they can do. But the idea that Japan's military would become more capable is not something we would be offended by. It's something we would actually be encouraged by.
So can you talked about points of possible cooperation with the Chinese, but on the points which were well known of contention, did you get a sense that there was a willingness the Chinese to move, or are they just?
Well, I wouldn't look. Today's meeting with our Chinese counterparts was not a negotiation on any of these matters. It is the first time that I met my counterpart in person, who, by the way, happens to also be the National Security Advisor. So he's not the archivist, though. But I suggested that perhaps he asked for that title, and that way we'd be equal. But
that's a lot bigger job than archivists.
Well, they have 5,000 years of archives too. So you know, but I would say that it was very positive very positive interaction, and constructive is the most important part. At the end of the day, look, no matter what, the United States and China have to have relations. We have to have communication. We have to be able to interact with one another. And it's just impossible for the foreign ministers of our respective countries to not engage in conversation. So I'm glad we had that meeting today. There's a lot of work to be done. No one's saying it's easy, but we do have some opportunities on some things we might be able to work on to begin to build some momentum in our relationship. I thought it was a very good meeting. I really felt encouraged by it. But look, there's work to be done.
Secretary, if I can ask a follow-up question. You mentioned that you see high odds of a meeting between the presidents of the U.S. and China. There's a big Chinese military parade happening scheduled for September 3rd. Did the Chinese foreign minister extend an invitation to that? Was that discussed as a potential opportunity?
No, we didn't discuss any specific date in mind in that regard. But the reason why I tell you there's a high probability they're going to meet is that they both want to meet. And I don't know President Xi, but I know President Trump, and you know, I can tell you that he's committed to having that meeting happen. So the reason why I think there's high odds of it happening is they both want it to happen. So I'm sure we'll work on a date and find a mutually acceptable date for both sides. And I'm pretty confident. We want it to be a good meeting, and we're going to work hard between now and whatever date that is to make sure that when that visit does happen, it's as productive as possible.
We saw you today seek out the Russian foreign minister in the larger gathering. Why did you go up and talk to him? What did you guys discuss? Did you give him a response from President Trump to the conversation you had yesterday?
No, it was just a follow-up on an unrelated item to our conversation yesterday, and I'll leave it at that.
Mr. Secretary, many Japanese people are concerning about the U.S. policy, which is demanding drastically increased defense spending. Do you have something to comment? How do you think?
Well, I wouldn't characterize it as a demand. I mean, we've encouraged them to invest in certain capabilities. It's less to do with the amount of money and more to do about certain things they can do. At the end of the day, we are in an agreement with Japan on collective self-defense, on the ability to come to each other's aid in a time of conflict or in a time of danger. And there are certain capacities that we think they have high capability. We understand, you know, there are dynamics that constitutional and legal limit their ability to invest in certain things versus other things. And but we have a very close relationship with Japan, very close. You may not know this, it's an inside joke that's now an outside joke, and I'll share with you, and that is that I believe I have met with the foreign minister of Japan more than any other foreign minister on the planet in my 5.5 months in office. I think we're up to like 9 or 10 meetings we interact, and how we joke with each other is that we see each other more than we see our respective spouses. And so it's a very close relationship, a very historic relationship, and one that's going to continue. So I think anyone who's looking for like drama or division there shouldn't be doing it, because the truth of the matter is our relationship with Japan is very solid, and obviously we're both open democratic governments, so when there are some differences of opinion, it's going to be public, not private, but I don't see that as a negative. But we have a very strong and very good relationship with Japan, and that's not going to change.
Mr. Secretary, in your conversation with Foreign Minister Wang, did the subject of Taiwan come up at all, and in particular the recent military drills being held by the Taiwanese?
No issue about drills. I think the Chinese position on Taiwan has been expressed. I don't think that's a mystery to anyone in terms of where they stand on it. And our position has also been expressed pretty openly. So it was not, as I said, our meeting today was not a negotiation or a back and forth on items. It was more about establishing a constructive baseline where we can continue to talk on multiple fronts, including trade, but beyond trade.
Secretary, if I can ask a question about your meeting with Vietnam. a country with one of the largest trade surpluses with the U.S. We've heard that there was maybe some misunderstanding about the agreement announced last week for a 20% tariff, that the Vietnamese weren't confident that that was fully agreed to, that perhaps they were looking for a 10 to 15% tariff. Was that an issue that they raised, trying to lower their tariff level? Was that the tariff an issue that they raised during the bilateral meeting?
Well, the issue of trade was raised. I'm not I'm not the negotiator on trade, and neither is the foreign minister. And so we weren't here to negotiate a trade deal. I'll refer you to our trade negotiators as far as the status of that. Clearly, Vietnam feels that if they enter into an agreement with the United States, they want to have a tariff rate that's at least as good as, if not better, than other countries that don't have a trade agreement with us. But I'll leave, that I have to refer you to our negotiators, because I just don't know what the status of those negotiations are at this point.
On that, the president did announce that there was an agreement reached with Vietnam, and yet Vietnam is saying that they never reached that agreement. So they must have raised this issue with you today.
No, I mean neither that issue. We just wasn't a trade meeting. We didn't. I'm not saying it's not a relevant issue. It's just not what the purpose of our meeting was about today. We talked about a lot of other issues, but perhaps the reason why it wasn't raised is because I'm not the trade negotiator, and these were not trade meetings.
Mr. Secretary, can I follow up on your meeting with Lavrov yesterday? Have you had a chance to speak to the president about the ideas that were discussed in that meeting, and what did you discuss with the foreign minister this morning?
Which from Lavrov?
When you spoke to him.
Well, I went to talk to him about another topic. It's not big or mysterious. It's just another topic. So and I'm not going to. We'll leave it at that. And as far as I did speak to the president last night, and but I have no news to report to you on it right now. But like I said, I thought yesterday's meeting. I don't want to oversell it. Okay, but it was constructive, and there was some things that perhaps we can build on. Maybe not. I don't know. We'll find out. But there are some things that we will potentially explore, and I relayed that to the president and our team last night.
The president says that there's going to be an announcement coming relevant or relating to Russia on Monday. Can you tell us a little bit about what his thinking is based on your conversation last night, where things currently stand?
No. I mean, that's what Monday will be about.
What about, he did say that there's a new agreement between the U.S. and NATO to get new U.S. weaponry through NATO to Ukraine, and NATO's going to fully pay for that, according to the president. Can you explain to us exactly, number one, how that's going to work, and when those weapons, as part of this agreement, will actually get to Ukraine?
Well, I think what you're referring to is something that Ukraine has already offered, and so has Europe, and that is to buy weapons from the United States and then provide them to Ukraine. At the end of the day, that some of the systems that Ukraine requires are systems that Europe doesn't make. They would have to purchase them from the United States. In addition to that, I would point to the fact that a number of the defensive weapons that Ukraine seeks, our allies in NATO have them. So as an example, Germany, I believe, has 13 or 14 Patriot batteries. Other countries do as well, Spain, others, and some have placed orders for that. And so we've continued to encourage our NATO allies to provide those weapons, systems, those defensive systems that Ukraine seeks, that they should provide those weapons to Ukraine since they have them in their stocks. And then we can enter into financial agreements with us where they can purchase the replacements.
So these are existing systems. This is nothing new.
It could be both. I mean, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's a lot faster to move something, for example, from Germany to Ukraine than it is to order it from a factory and get it there. So there are a couple different ways to approach it. But the key is that there are existing capacities within existing U.S. systems within Europe right now that could be transferred to Ukraine, and then the Europeans could purchase the replacements from the United States. That's one aspect of what I think the president was referring to yesterday.
Just to follow up on the Taiwan issue, did Foreign Minister Wang warn you against welcoming President Lai in a transit visa through the U.S.? Did he transit visit through the U.S.? Did he mention anything about that?
This was not a warning type meeting. I mean, obviously we understand their viewpoints on Taiwan. They're well stated. They've been stated for many years, and but this was not a meeting where neither side warned each other about anything. This was very constructive and productive, and I hope that that's how they reflected as well, because I thought it was a very positive meeting.
Any surprises over the last 2 days?
Surprises?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. We were very warmly received, I tell you. I mean, the reception's been great. No, I'm just saying that it was a very friendly environment, and I think the reiteration to the point we've made, and that is, look, I read these things about how the U.S. is not focused on the Indo-Pacific, But it's funny, everywhere I travel in the world, the headline is the U.S. is not paying enough attention, whether it's the Western Hemisphere or at NATO or even in the Middle East. I think sometimes there's a media dynamic that covers certain parts of the world more than others, but the relationships we have here have existed for a long time, a long time. When you talk about 6,000 American companies that are directly invested into economies of Southeast Asia, we're not walking away from that. We're not walking away from that. We're not walking away from our defense ties that we have in the region. We're not walking away from the strong economic ties we have in the region. On the contrary, we want to build on them. Just yesterday, we signed a memorandum of understanding with Malaysia on civil nuclear cooperation. I believe as early, either last night or early this morning, our arrangement on another civil nuclear program with Thailand that came into effect. So we have a lot of positive things going on, and we're going to continue to build on those. We're excited about them, and we're not going to walk away from them.
Mr. Secretary, while you were in Malaysia, the Trump administration announced a new nomination to be ambassador of Malaysia. Nick Adams, he's sort of well known on X as a sort of social media personality and does lots of other things. I was wondering what you could say about his nomination, why Mr. Adams was the right person for this pretty important position in the Indo-Pacific.
Yeah, the president makes those nominations. I support the nomination. He went through our process at the Presidential Personnel Office. We look forward to the Senate confirming him so he can get here and be a part of our team.
Can I ask a step back question on the trade strategy? You've talked many times now about how decades of trade policy have led to the deindustrialization of the U.S. And so obviously you and other aides are trying to bring manufacturing or other industrial processes back to the U.S., but you haven't really given us a vision of what exactly that entails. Like what kinds of jobs are supposed to be coming back to the U.S.? Howard Lutnick talked about people screwing in tiny things into iPhones, which people mocked after he said that line. But so what about you? Like what vision of industrialization do you see?
Well, there are certain capacities countries have to be able to have. So, for example, I'm just using these as examples, the ability to build a ship. Right now, we go around the world and people say, well, we bought 200 Boeing jets. Well, Boeing has to be able to make them. And frankly, we have huge backlogs on that. So you talk about pharmaceuticals as an example. Talk about national security. We've lost our ability to make pharmaceuticals in the United States and become heavily dependent on foreign supply chains for the active ingredients that are necessary for pharmaceuticals. So I can go on and on, but I mean, the capability of making things has a national security component to it, not just a jobs component to it. They're both important. So I would look to those as examples of things that the U.S., because of certain decisions that were made by previous policymakers, we've seen some of these core industrial capabilities that are necessary not just for economic stability but for national security leave the United States. I would also argue that in addition to our domestic manufacturing capability, I think we and others should be deeply concerned about certain supply chain vulnerabilities and over-reliance on one part of the world versus anywhere else. I don't think it's healthy for the United States or for the global economy to be so heavily dependent, as an example, on China or any other country for that matter, where all of the industrial or manufacturing capacity or supplies and the supply chain of a key element is all derived in one place. So as I'm sure you've seen the announcement yesterday where the Department of Defense has taken an equity stake in a company that will be able to process rare earths. One thing is to have access to raw material. The other thing is to be able to process that raw material into something that's usable for everything from high technology to anything that has a motor in it. So I think we at a minimum have to diversify supply chains and secure them. Some of that will be domestic, others will be in allied nation states, but these are core components of the kinds of things we need to be focused on. And it's not just the deindustrialization of America, it's the loss of these key components and the concentration of those in one or two countries around the world that leave not just us, but many countries vulnerable. That's just not a sustainable or acceptable situation to find ourselves in.
Thank you, everybody. Thank
All
you.
right, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Secretary.
You too.